Hi, and welcome to day 4 of my 65 Days of TypeScript Challenges challenge. Today's challenge, we're going to be looking at how to implement a tuple to object type. So let's first of all look at what the problem statement is, and then we'll look at the test case we need to satisfy and the example. Yeah, these are actually two test cases we need to satisfy from the look of it. Yeah, and then we'll move over to trying to implement the type utility type correctly. So what exactly do we want to implement? It says given an array, transform into an object type and have the key values match the values in the given array, basically. So the example they gave is given an array Tesla, Model 3, Model X, Model Y as const, um, create an object where the keys match the values and the keys values also match the values of the array. So Tesla becomes the key for the first parameter in the object and also the value for the first parameter in the object, and model 3 becomes the key for the second parameter in the object and also the value for the second parameter in the object, and so on and so forth. Okay, cool. One thing I want to point out is what the asconst here means. Let's jump over here to the actual code. Um, so in TypeScript, there's this concept of type narrowing, where you can force a type. You can force the type inferred by TypeScript to take on a narrower version of the inferred type. So quick example would be let's say we had something like a const string type guess value hula baloo. Now if I'm correct, this will actually be a very specific type of hula baloo and not string. If I'm wrong, it will be a string type. Okay, cool. So the infer type for this string type is hula baloo. Now I'm just wondering how to make it take on an actual string type. Yeah, I can't remember. But this is type narrowing at play, right? TypeScript has forced this to take on a very specific string, hula baloo, and not any string in general. But let's say like we wanted an array. Let's say we made this an array and we added other strings to that array. Mango, orange. My guess here is that TypeScript will infer this as an array of strings. Yeah, like it does here. Cool. So in terms of using the asconst assertion, the idea is to force TypeScript to infer the narrowest possible type we can for this array. And when we do that, it will no longer be a string array, but it will now be just an array that has to contain 3 types of string values: hula baloo, mango, orange. So let's look. Yeah. So what we now have is that the string type is a very specific array type that has to contain these values, otherwise called a tuple. So that's how you create a tuple in the type space. You use the asconst assertion. Without the asconst assertion, TypeScript will still do type inference, but it will not infer the narrowest possible type. So without the asconst assertion, it infers a more vague type, which is just a string array. Cool. So now that that's out of the way and we understand how exactly we are creating a tuple here from this array using the asconst assertion, let's look at our test. Our test tells us what to expect. It expects that the type created by our yet to be defined tuple to object utility type will be equal to this object type. Okay, cool. That makes sense. There's one more thing. Here we're told to expect an error um, if we try to create an object from a tuple type that contains non-string types basically. So these are the two cases that we have to resolve. So let's get cracking. Let's try and implement a type that resolves those two test cases. Disclaimer, this was really challenging for me. I had to look at the solution to understand how to how to get a key aspect of this problem of the solution working, and the key aspect that I needed was how to index into a tuple type to get the values in an iterative manner. So first of all, I'll show you how to do that. So given a tuple type like t, how do you um, access all the values of t? And what I mean is say all that a tuple to object type does initially is just access the first value. When we try to do something like type check, guess the value, tuple object, tuple. Let's do it over here. Doing something wrong. So the idea is we want to just create something that checks what the value of t0 is. So let's see, type check, yeah. Guess the value. Okay, tuple object, TupleToObject. And I think the mistake we're making is we're passing in tuple instead of type of tuple. Yeah, cool. So this gives us Tesla, which is the first value in the tuple. And I was really struggling with figuring out how to access every other value in a way that I can iterate through all those values. Turns out that you can do that using a union type. So if we created a union of 0 and 1, we'll get a type that accesses both the first and the second values of the tuple. Let's check. Tesla Model 3. And so on and so forth. Yeah, so this way we've accessed all the values in the tuple, but we don't want to do this when we don't know how large or how long our tuple can be. So the generic way to do this is just to do t number, and that will access every accessible index in the tuple. I'd read the entire effective TypeScript book, and I did not know you could do this. So yeah, definitely had to look at the solution for that. Now that we are able to do that, all that we need to do to accomplish our results is just to look through every value in the tuple, and for every value in the tuple, use that value as a key and also use that value as the value. So let's do the looping through every value in the tuple using the typical map syntax. So let's do k in t number, yep. And let's do the k in t number will access all the values that will access all this will access all these values: Tesla, Model 3, Model X, Model Y, and those are the exact same values we need to be the values. So that seems to solve most of our problems, except that we have this problem here saying we expect an error when we try to create a tuple from when we try to create a tuple from what's this? An array of different types, an array of arrays, an array of objects. I'm not sure whether this is actually the correct way to do this, but I know that with key value pairs in an object, you typically want the key to be a string. So I'm just going to constrain. I'm going to constrain. I'm going to constrain our tuple to be a tuple of strings, and that seems to solve all our test cases. So I'll take that as an answer, and I hope this was insightful in terms of learning, especially in terms of learning how to iterate through a tuple just by using this syntax.